Welcome to the Pastor's Podcast. This is Pastor Scott with Pastor José today. And today we're just going to, we just wanted to open up the mic, Jose, to get you an opportunity to share with our church family about your story, about your testimony. I think this is something that we've done a few different times now, and people seem to be really blessed by it, to get to know our pastors some more and get to know really how the Lord called us to himself, how the Lord called us to ministry. But so anyways, you can say hello.
Yes. First of all, Thank you. That's okay.
I just kept talking.
Well, thank you, first of all, Scott, for giving me this opportunity to share with the rest of our church family how God changed my life. Yeah, It will be a pleasure to share that.
Absolutely. Okay, so when did you first hear the gospel?
When I was 8 years old.
Okay. Where'd you hear it from?
Well, I grew up in a culturally Catholic family. I come from a very wealthy family. My parents, my father especially, inherited a lot of money. And but with that came a lot of heartache and everything. They inherited the money when they were very young. And by the time I was 8 years old, we have lost everything. We were in the process of losing our house. My father had pulled a lot of loans on the house, and eventually we lost it. And in that time, when I was living in that house, which wasn't ours, we were going through a lot of hard times. We barely had food to eat. I remember one particular time that we had like 4 tortillas and 1 egg for my mom and my 4 siblings to eat. And I remember my mom crying and seeing her crying. At the beginning, I didn't know why. And also I had seen her that she wasn't eating because she wanted to make sure we ate. So we had this beautiful house in a beautiful neighborhood with all this nice stuff, but we had no food to eat because my father had lost everything. I think looking back, probably he was depressed. And nothing, and we had nothing. We lost everything, and eventually we lost the house. And it was under that condition that at the age of 8 years old, I remember this Christian pastor who just moved from Texas. He was born in Guatemala, but he grew up in Texas, and he started a church in Texas, and then he was called to start a church in Guatemala, and him and his family, and they came in, and they were Christians, and we were impressed by the kids, by the children, and they started having Bible studies there at their house.
So when you first heard it at 8 years old, was it like super compelling and you like grabbed onto it, or did it take some time for you? The way I was introduced to the gospel is huge, right? Looking back now, I knew the gospel in the context of Christ having died for our sins, even from the Catholic Church where I was going, but rarely you will hear it. So that stayed with me. Also, when I was 5 or 6 in the farm, when everything was going well, I remember hearing that Christ was everything and that he came to save sinners and that we were all sinners. And I used to go to sleep listening to these itinerary preachers that will go in the farms, from farm to farm. Really?
Yeah. And so that message stayed there. So I knew I knew there was something special about Christ, but I couldn't put my finger on it. And I knew that I was a sinner. I could tell. I could look up around me, and I knew, man, we're all messed up. You know, God gave me that awareness. And I knew that Christ was the way, but I really didn't understand the gospel. And it was when we were at the Bible study that they were having in our block that I got to see more of the power of God displayed by this woman who was demon possessed. He was sitting next to me. And the preacher was teaching, teaching. I don't remember what he was teaching. I just remember the demon-possessed woman got up, started spitting at him and saying, "All of you who are here are hypocrites." And she started hitting him. And the preacher said, be at peace in the name of Jesus. She fell to the ground. Then she asked, why am I here? Who put me here? And she was all confused. And they told her that they wanted to talk to her. Something happened, and took her to church, pray for her. The demon got cast out. Next week, the demon-possessed woman among all the kids was, we were talking, and it's going to give her testimony. So we went to hear her testimony, and she shared how she had mental gaps in her mind, that she would cross the street, and she didn't know how she crossed the street. How she tried to kill her husband, and stab her husband in the back with scissors. How she had a deep desire to push her daughter into a ravine to kill her, and then she started just sharing that she was free. She didn't know what freedom was, and sharing Christ and everything. And so, and then they share the gospel there again, and they not only that, but also the power of God. And I had my Catholic Bible checking. Yeah, this is true. I mean, yeah, this is right. So they asked if anybody wants to put their faith in Christ, and I was like, I don't know, God, if you're the same one, but these people, it says, they have power, and this is your power, because those who believe in me, they will do these things. And so that's when, at 8 years old, God has grace, and that's how I came to know Him, and my life changed. I knew I was a different person since then.
Really? Mm-hmm. At 8 years old?
At 8 years old.
Your life changed.
Yeah.
What did that look like?
First, my friends start teasing me. My friends start making fun of me and everything. And I knew that I couldn't get back at them. I knew I was different. I knew that it came with it. I just had... There was something different. I mean, still sinful, still, but the understanding was that even though the flesh wasn't obeying, and the flesh, it took a long time to be sanctified, but the understanding that I was a different person was there.
Wow.
Yeah, I will talk to my uncles. I will share the gospel with anybody who will hear me. I mean, older people, and they would say, well, that's very nice. It's good for you, keep going, But they didn't want anything to do with it. And that didn't dissuade me. I just kept telling them.
You were a preacher immediately.
I couldn't see it like that. But excuse me, it was more like...
you just couldn't help it.
I couldn't help it. I had to tell them. I had to tell them about it. Well, I guess it's a preaching in a sense, but not in the sense of preaching in front of that. That's the way I was taking it, yeah.
So, okay, so what did the rest of your childhood look like then? Or what did your faith journey look like, between then and, young adulthood, between then and the end of high school?
I mean, things didn't change immediately. I mean, if anything, they got worse. We lost the house. We went and lived in the maid's quarters on my grandma's house. Things got very dicey. I went to a private school at the beginning, and then in public school. So I wasn't even ready for that. I mean, the crowds were a little bit different, rougher and tougher. And
you had to navigate all that with this kind of new relationship with Jesus?
Yes, exactly. That is what helped me to realize that I always knew that even though my father wasn't there, that God was there for me to defend me. And I had very unique experiences of God always being there, not only knowing that He was there, but also physically at a very protection level through my friends. If somebody wanted to harm me or something or whatever, somebody else will stand up and I said, well, they're going to beat me up now. It's like, and then suddenly this guy, who's a big guy, a friend of mine, shows up of nowhere, hey, he will get involved. There was always that a level of knowing that God had my back at that age. Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
That's incredible. What, so how old were you when you came to the States?
I was 17.
You're 17.
Yeah.
Okay. How did that, I don't know, impact or shape or make part of your faith harder, or maybe your faith easier? I don't know. Like, how did that affect things?
No, that's a good question. I came to the States first. My father was here. When they were young, they were wealthy. He applied for his green card. He got it like in 2 weeks. So he kept it valid. And so he was here when I came, and he told me, "Hey, do you want to come and study here?" So I said, "Yeah, sure. But you need to learn English." So I came. I learned English, and my plan was just to come learn English and see if I like the culture. And my sister came with me, and she didn't like the culture. It was too fast-paced for her. I grew up in a neighborhood where most of my friends were foreigners, Chileans, Spanish, German, American. So I was used to different cultures, and that was attractive to me. So it's like, okay, I like this. I get to know people from all different parts of the world, right? So that was And I came as a foreign student, and eventually my father applied for me for my legal residency, and God worked all of that out. But looking back, I think in the plan of God, I needed. I don't know if this is the question you're asking, but I'll assume for now.
That's fair enough. You can answer the question that you think I'm asking. That's fine.
If the question is, why do you think God brought you here, and how has that impacted your life? I think that in the providence of God, He needed to affect so much change that He needed to uproot me from my culture to do a change that He wanted to affect on me. And I think that has to do because of my stubbornness and being in that culture. It would happen, but the longest time, I don't know. But by removing me, it's like I can start fresh and new with you, and hold on to what is good of the Guatemalan culture, and hold on to what is good of the American culture. But I want to start something new with you. So I looking back, that's what I see, that He wanted to change me.
It's incredible to see in the story of your immigration, ultimately a story of God's kind sanctification, right? That this was about your ultimate good. This was about Him making you more and more like Himself. That wasn't even just what I hear you saying that strikes me. What I would expect you to say, and maybe just from our, I don't know, maybe my just cultural assumptions. What I would expect you to say is, I came to, God brought me from Guatemala to the United States for a better life, and He sanctified me along the way.
Yeah.
And what I hear you say is the opposite.
Exactly.
That He brought me from Guatemala to the United States to sanctify me.
Yeah.
And there are other pieces and ways that He used that and blessed and provided stewardships along the way, but that the purpose, that the sanctifying work He was doing wasn't a secondary thing that He did that He was doing something else, but it was actually at the core of even your immigration story.
Yeah. My father comes from a family of womanizers. My cousins all womanizers. So I would have grown in the soup of that. And most likely I would have ended up there. And He, by His grace, He removed me from that context and put me here. It's
But you didn't. So now that's in reflection, right?
Yes, in reflection.
Right? Because obviously,
I wasn't aware.
Obviously you didn't set out from Guatemala.
No.
I need to move to the United States for the sake of sanctification, right? Like that wasn't
not at all.
What strikes me about it, I mean, it's incredible, an incredible part of your story. It strikes me as just a deep truth for all of us to consider. Whether it's from another country or another city or another state, lots of us didn't just grow up in Los Angeles, but came to Los Angeles And I think sometimes we talk about how the Lord's brought us here and placed us here for the sake of the city, and that's true as well, and to love the city and to be used to spread the gospel here. But to also consider that the Lord's brought us all here, in a sense, primarily for a sanctifying purpose, because He loves us so much, and He wants us to be like Him so much that this is a part, an important part, a central part of why He's drawn us here at these different times. What a powerful reflection to see as you look back on all of that.
Yeah, it's amazing. And these are the things that we can see and understand when we reflect and look back. Can you imagine when we get to heaven and He shows us all the stuff? It's like, oh my goodness. Yeah, He's that good.
So good. So what was that journey? What was that relationship with God like in the early years? In the early years being here, in your relationship with God, did you draw closer to Him? In your relationship with God, were you kind of distracted from Him? And what, I don't know, what was that like?
Let me summarize it in this way. I think from my teens to my mid-20s, it was a battle for my love for God, loving Him or loving what I wanted. And that was a battle. It was back and forth, back and forth. I remember praying for my wife when I was 8 years old, and I told God that I just wanted to date my wife, and nobody else, because I didn't want to hurt her. Because I saw my mom how hurt she got by my dad. So I wanted to avoid that. And sure enough, I had my first girlfriend here, and we dated, but I knew that we weren't one for the other. We were very different, and God was just setting me up just to show me what an idol my wife, the idea of wife was, and marriage. So in a way, it's like I wanted to show to God and to the world that I was not going to be like my dad. That I wanted to be different, but somehow I guess I wanted to accomplish it without the help of God. And I didn't understand. And I didn't understand that my heart had to belong to Him 100%, so that wouldn't happen. And so finally, after that, we broke off, and then God will sabotage all the relationships that I had because He wanted my heart. And I kind of knew, but I didn't want to give it to Him. and then it's like, okay, it's like, if you wanted to be married, if you don't, I know I don't have the gift of being single, but if you want to be married, that's okay.
Yeah.
I will say yes to you, and I will love you. But I was feeling like He was forcing me, right? And little by little, He started purifying that, and I realized, God, at the end, I got to it. He started showing me. I started seeing. He's been always showing me. So I seeing how good He was, and how that He could be trusted. That I said to Him, "Okay, God, you know what? You know everything. If you want me to be single, that's okay." And that's like, weeks later, I met Becky.
Of course. Gosh.
So,
oh man!
But God wanted to know, and for me it was that, because my idol was my wife. For some of us, might be something different. But
all of those journeys look different, but that was how the Lord worked it in yours, and gosh, it's so interesting. And I mean, I resonate with that battle. I think a lot of us resonate with that battle, right? Back and forth between, God, I know what you want from me, but. And it struck me as you were talking, it makes me think of how often we want to do things for God, but we want to do them on our terms, right? I don't want to be dependent on you. You're like, oh, okay, just tell me what to do, and then I'll leave it up to me and I'll go do it. And He's like, no, like,
doesn't work.
I want your whole heart. I want you dependent on me in order to do it.
I want your whole life.
Yeah. Oh, radical. And so, so then you went through that journey kind of in your 20s, and eventually you met Becky and got married and graduated and became an architect. How did you get from a 20-something, newly married, had given your heart to the Lord, pursuing Him in your architecture career, to not just pursuing being a pastor, but a vocational pastor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that was the. So when I was an architect, I was fine. I was thankful to God, and I was teaching the college and careers group at Wesley Baptist. Mm-hmm. And so I was paying my dues and everything. But I did know deep inside that God had called me to be a pastor, even when I was 17.
All the way back then?
All the way back then. I wanted to be a pastor. And my idea to be a pastor is I wanted to be a pastor, but I didn't want to get paid. Huh. I wanted to do it, be affluent enough to do it so that nobody could use, like, you're getting paid to be a pastor, that's why you're a pastor, but you really, no. I wanted to remove any obstacle from people.
But you also kind of wanted to do it, you wanted to be self-sufficient,
right?
Yes, I think you didn't want to be dependent.
No, I wanted to be self-sufficient, but even in my desires, I wanted to show how self-righteous I was, which is even worse. So, like, I am going to do it right, Scott.
Yeah, that's right. And I'm going to show everybody how right it is.
But God had all the plans of dependency, right? Uh-huh. And so everything changed. I was, you can say happy, mm-hmm. but I didn't know that happiness wasn't sufficient. Mm. My brother came from Guatemala, who is a pastor, and he told me, hey, you have a call to be a pastor? He says, yeah. You know what? You're never going to be as happy until you answer that call.
Your brother said this to you?
My brother said that to me.
Wow.
And he left, of course. So that stayed in my mind. And then it's like, and then I said, I have to go to God in prayer because I knew. So I said, God, listen, I know you have called me to be a pastor. I don't want to be a pastor. I am fine. Thank you. I have a good life. I have all of this, whatever people can desire. Mm-hmm. You have provided for me, and I'm okay. But if you really, truly are calling me to be a pastor, I said, change my heart. Mm. And in 2 weeks, he changed it. And then after that, I start saying, well, now you need to tell Becky. And I forgot that when I married Becky, I told her.
You're going to need to tell Becky. I like that.
Yeah. When I married Becky, I told her, listen, you might be, I told her, even the before we date, I said, listen, I don't believe on dating a lot. I believe on dating people who I think we can, that was my way of thinking, personal.
Yeah.
That I have, that you're going to be my wife and your husband. And so you need to know that, I'm not playing around, I believe in, this is the way I believe in. Yeah. And also that I might become a pastor, so she knew. Uh-huh. So I have forgotten that. So when I told her, hey, listen, okay, great. Well, she's like, well, you told me, if I remember correctly. Uh-huh. I said, okay, we need to look for a seminary for you. And it's like, okay, I am done with school. It's like, well, don't you want to do it well? You always tell me that you like to do things well. It says, yeah. Well, let's look for a seminary.
Okay. This is what Becky says.
This is Becky. Oh my gosh. Man, grad school, undergrad school, grad school, and it's like, and
you've done all this.
Then I'm thinking, well, it might be 2 years, 3 years, and then it's like, I talked to Jerry. Master seminary. That's going. How long is it going to be? 4 or 5 years. Depends on you. It could be longer. He's like, okay.
So, how old were you when you went back to seminary?
That's a good question. 40.
You were 40.
Yeah, I remember Moses. Yeah, I feel like Moses. I couldn't, in quotation marks, like being called in my old age to go to seminary. Yeah, not to deliver people, but just to go to seminary.
And you'd already been to grad school.
Yeah,
you'd already, done that. And like you said, this isn't like it's 102 unit 4-year master's degree. It's like it's kind of insane.
And the languages.
Yeah.
And listen, when you're 40,
Yeah.
your mind is, your memory
Well, I
is
am now. I'm
not,
done. Yeah. I'm not going to do that.
yeah. It's the memory is like, okay, guys, you're calling me to do this. You better help me because, and I didn't graduate with honors or was expecting to. I just wanted to graduate. And I think God helped me a lot.
So I know that process, it's different for different people. It's different for different pastors. Sometimes the time of both calling and even the time of training in seminary can be, rich and sweet. Sometimes it can be dry. You're doing so much studying that sometimes it weighs on your relationship with the Lord. What was your relationship with the Lord like in the midst of that?
By the grace of God, it was great. I mean, I got to see some men of God. I've been exposed to good, solid Christians, by the grace of God here in the States. But man, I had some professors that I was like floored when I talked to them, and with the humility and the sincerity that was my prayer at the very beginning. Because I mean, I'm still arrogant, but I was very much arrogant back then. And I realized how knowledgeable they were, how much they knew God, how humble they were. I said, God, forget Jesus for a while. I just want, these guys are attainable, right? I want to be like them. I want to learn to be humble like them, because many of them model it in a way that is tangible, that you wanted to have it. And that was very, that was one of the first things. That attracted me. It was a great time. There were challenging times. There was times like I know God was opposing me. He was breaking me, but I knew it was Him. So that makes it different. It was hard, but you know that at the end of it, right? There's the hope. There's more life. There's change. So that was very. I knew there was a matter of fact that He was just breaking my heart and wrong things that I have learned.
Yeah.
And so it was a great experience. And the opportunity that I had here, because Nueva Vida started at that time.
Yeah. Okay. So I was going to ask, and I think we've told a little bit of this story, but what? I'm sure there's people that haven't heard it. How did you go from this desire to be a pastor to this desire to pastor here?
Well, we started Nueva Vida here with a meeting with Brian. I remember meeting with Brian at the coffee. Hey, I know you're going to seminary, and I just wanted to, just talk to you to see if you wanted to start something here, in Spanish, and, plant a seed. That's what Brian said. And I said, yeah, okay. I hadn't even considered it until Brian brought it.
Yeah.
And, we'll help you, we'll support you, and that's the way it started. And yeah. And the beautiful thing is that whatever I was learning in seminary, I had an opportunity to teach it as well. So that was like, in a way, a release of information, and then you can put it into practice and see what really worked and what didn't work because I hadn't understood it correctly. So it's like having the lab of the seminary to put into practice what you're learning.
Yeah, and then the Lord just continued to grow that and develop it, and I think in the midst of that, there's still I don't know if you knew that you were going to be a pastor here.
No, I didn't know. In fact, I was candidating to a church in a church in San Bernardino.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, because I knew we were fine here, we were complete, and I hadn't even considered it, to be honest with you. And back then there was no, probably in your minds, guy, you were about the multi-ethnic church, but I wasn't thinking about that.
Yeah, it's not who we were.
No, it's not who we were. And I was just thinking, just starting a Bible study in Spanish, and then it grew up to a ministry, and then God started doing other things, and then Pastor Ara comes into the mix, and so it's Yeah,
it's just, I mean, reflecting on it, it's amazing to me what the Lord did through all of that. And I remember even the choice at that point to say, in so many ways, I think the recognition of you as a pastor came shortly before that, but you you had, just like we say repeatedly, right? Like we don't make pastors, God makes pastors.
Exactly.
And God had made you a pastor here,
Right.
and you were shepherding. And at that point, I distinctively remember, going into the new year and feeling like, man, we don't have the budget to hire another pastor. And then thinking, but we don't have a choice. Like, look at what God's doing, and we're going to trust and see, and if we have to make adjustments along the way, we will, just like we always do, and figure that out together. But it became so obvious what the Lord was doing that even in one sense, if it was a stretch for us as a church, it seemed to be following in the Lord's footsteps, and has been such an overwhelming blessing ever since then, that I think I don't think, and that's where I don't think any of us were thinking of it the way God was.
Exactly.
I think he was building something that even as he was building it, we're like, oh, that's neat. But we couldn't see the whole picture of what he was doing.
Right. We always are surprised.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it makes me think of that prayer from Ephesians, right? He's always doing more than we could ask or imagine. Yeah. And that's what he's done. It's what he continues to do.
Exactly.
Okay. So the last question, one of the greatest joys for me of even just the last handful of years of my life in ministry has been the growth and the depth of our friendship. It's just been, we've grown with, I mean, even when you became a pastor, we were friends, and we were pastors together, and we knew each other, and we worked together, and we loved each other. But the Lord has, I know, just taken us to all sorts of different depths and walked through things together, and it's been such a joy and a privilege. I would love for you to try to summarize, I guess all that to say, background to say, I've seen the Lord work in you in so many ways. If you were to think about the last, I don't know, whatever it's been, 8 years since you became a pastor, you talk about these journeys and all the different things the Lord was teaching you. What do you think is one or two of the most significant things the Lord has taught you, maybe opened up your heart to over the last 5, 6, 7, 8 years during your time as a pastor? What has the Lord opened your eyes to that you hadn't seen before?
That's a excellent question, and I do know the answer because I have not only believe it, but I have experienced it. Like in John says, his love. The more I experience his love, and the word is ginosko, experiential knowledge, and the more I believe that he loves me, because he has already given us all of his love. His love is there and it's abundant. But the limiting factor is us, that we don't believe that he loves us that much. And I think and I don't understand the order of these two, of the believing and the experiencing his love, but I think it goes back and forth. The more you experience it, the more you believe it. The more you believe it, the more you experience it. That's where I am right now.
Yeah.
And this is what I'm telling people, and this is what I am. I hope my preaching is changing in that regard. That it is that love that transforms us. It is that love that changes us. It's beyond understanding. It's what changes us. I have no other words to explain it. It's transformational. It's so pure, so noble, so wonderful, so unselfish. That you're drawn and you want to be like he is. And even that desire comes from him. He gave us the willingness and the desire to do all these things. So it's it's his love, man. I wish I had something different to say.
Well, I don't wish you had anything different to say. That's the reason I asked that question, actually, because I knew that answer. And because it's been so rich. I feel like what the Lord has taught you has taught me. I mean, the Lord's taught me indirectly in my relationship with Him,
and I learned from you as well.
But the depth of which and the recognition that the Lord continues to bring to your heart and comes back to, I think has taught me, has led us as a church, has opened my eyes to the depth of God's love, even in maybe the times or the places where I might just assume I understand it. Right?
Yeah, we all do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And seeing you go deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper into that, it's been a consistent just challenge and inspiration to me to be like, oh, there is more to be had. Like it made me think of it in these last few weeks, preaching on the love of God in 1 John, right? We've all been preaching through it. And
it's hitting us all hard.
It is. It's what we're talking about right now. So we preached through 1 John, 10 years ago. And I keep like going back to sermons. There were a couple of these that I preached the same passage 10 years ago. I'm like, oh, okay, like this will be helpful. They're like barely helpful. But part of it's because Mark Dever had an interview about this. You say, he's like, I don't know why I'd plagiarize somebody else's sermon. He said, my own sermons aren't even helpful because it's not where I am. It's not where our church is. It's not exactly.
We have grown.
When I look back, there's something different. There's something so much more I want to just even strive to convey. And I think there's so much of that I have learned from and seen in you and not even in the achievement of some depth of love that you have, but in the constant trajectory of how God has
His faithfulness,
faithfully just continue to open our eyes to the magnitude of His grace, the magnitude of His kindness, the magnitude of His love.
It is Him, who opens our eyes, and where I am right now. I mean, I want more, in His time, but in His time, His perfect time. But if I could summarize what He's doing in me, and I'm sure in other people, is that the more I realize how big His love is for me, the less I beg for love and attention from other people. And because that's who we are. We want love, we want attention, and there's nothing wrong with that. But their love is not strong enough to fill us and to fulfill us. And then it changes you. You realize now, not only that, but now you can be that love that comes from God. Now you can be the conduit. He's the fountain, the conduit to love them because they desire that. And when we love them with the love of God, then they turn themselves to God, and then they're satisfied in Him. So it's like, and there's such a freedom on that I'm just beginning to experience it. In these levels, whatever they are, it doesn't matter. It's just the importance is just to grow closer to Him, not closer to Him, but to grow in holiness and sanctity, to be like He is. But it is that idea that it is what it is. God is sovereign. He's in control, and He loved me, and I'm secure in His love. And His love in me is so growing that there is more for others, and be kind and patient and with them. Of course, I'm not perfect. I still have my moments where I digress, but even then, that He says, it's okay.
Yeah.
I still love you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So sweet.
Yeah.
Well, thanks so much for that, Jose. Thanks for even just this snippet of giving us eyes on these bits of your story. It is such a beautiful story that, again, like all of our lives, magnifies Him, shows His goodness, and even in at every turn in surprising ways.
And when we respond to that beautiful love, there's nothing else that we can do but to magnify Him.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, that's the proper response.
That's right. It is. It is. Well, to him be the glory as we close up. So thanks, Jose. Thanks for sharing that with all of us. And thank you, church, for listening and joining us too. We love you, and we can't wait to worship together with you on Sunday.
Amen.